They may be watching you, but I'm watching them. This is Gabriel Custodiet. Just to let you know that the episode you're about to listen to is going to be great, but it's only one piece of the puzzle. If you're new to privacy or looking for a clear vision of next steps, start by going to escapethetechnocracy.com. All our cutting-edge analysis about escaping the surveillance grid occurs exclusively on our paid newsletter, Watchman's Torch, and in our world-class video tutorials. This podcast is just a preview. This is not some game for us. We live this stuff and we consult on it. Your support means we have no sponsors and can speak the unmitigated truth as we see it on this show. Check out the show notes and escapethetechnocracy.com. All right, I'm very pleased today to be joined by one of my personal heroes, Doug Casey, and this is his third time on the show. I just re-released our first two conversations with some remastered audio the other day, just because I really enjoy these conversations. Really appreciate Doug Casey. He's a speculator, he's an author, he's an anarchist philosopher, the original international man. Doug Casey, welcome back to the show. How are you doing today?
Very well, Gabriel. I'm usually in South America, either Uruguay or Argentina, but for what's left of the northern summer, I'm here on the shores of the Chesapeake Bay in Virginia. Love the fall weather, and I like being back in the U.S., even though the U.S. is fraying around the edges, I've got to say.
I'm just going to mention this here. We are going to have a dedicated episode on the new book, the Renaissance Man book that Doug Casey and Matt Smith and Maxim Smith put together called The Preparation. And we'll discuss that as we go along here, but just to plug that excellent book, The Preparation, I'm sure we'll talk about it in this conversation. But I wanted to read to you a paragraph from a book, and I just wanted your reaction to this, kind of your commentary, your unpacking of this. And this comes from The Metaphysics of War by Julius Evola. And here's what he says. He says that the fundamental principle underlying all justifications of war, from the point of view of human personality, is heroism. War, it is said, offers man the opportunity to awaken the hero who sleeps within him. War breaks the routine of comfortable life. By means of its severe ordeals, it offers a transfiguring knowledge of life, life according to death. The moment the individual succeeds in living as a hero, even if it is in the final moment of his earthly life, weighs infinitely more on the scale of values than a protracted existence spent consuming monotonously among the trivialities of cities. From a spiritual point of view, these possibilities make up for the negative and destructive tendencies of war, which are one-sidedly and tendentiously highlighted by pacifist materialism. War makes one realize the relativity of human life and therefore also the law of more than life, and thus war has always an anti-materialist value, a spiritual value. And that comes from The Metaphysics of War by Julius Evola. It's the first paragraph. What are your thoughts on that, Doug?
Oddly, there's some truth to what he's saying, but there's a lot of truth in a lot of stupid and evil dictums. It's as you were reading that, it reminded me, because I, believe it or not, read a lot of classical literature and ancient history. The Romans said, who was the poet that actually formulated this saying, dulce et decorum est pro patria mori.
Yeah, according to Wikipedia, it's Horace.
Oh, okay, yeah. It's sweet and proper to die for your country. And I would say it's basically just stupid. I mean, there are a lot of things that you can die for, but to die for something to aggrandize a political entity, or in particular, a particular politician who would have started that war for God knows what reason, makes no sense. So who's the person that, who is he exactly? The guy that wrote what you just...
He's an Italian fascist philosopher.
Oh, I might have guessed, yes. Well, a philosopher, of course, that word breaks down to a lover of wisdom. And I don't think there's a lot of wisdom in that, but it is good rhetoric that he's employing to make people feel good about war.
Are you familiar with the poem by Wilfred Owen, the World War I poet, Dulce et decorum est?
Yeah, that's That's I am actually, strangely enough, I just happened to have read that yesterday.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting. Yeah, I'll just read a few lines and let you comment. So this is the ending where he's sharing his own experience. He says, "If you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from the froth-corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cud, of vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues, my friends, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory the old lie, dulce et decorum est, pro patria mori."
and it's a short poem. I mean, it couldn't take more than 2 minutes if you read it all, I think. But it's a really good poem because every single line of that poem describes what a nightmare doing the things that soldiers have to do in war, especially World War I, which is probably about the most degraded experience that you could have and still be a human. I mean, to be literal cannon fodder. It's disgusting. It really is, and people only realize it after it's all over. Funny thing, I was doing a podcast just before we got on, and we were talking about how when you come to a fork in the road, well, I've always thought, well, take it, but which way, right or left? Well, sometimes you just don't know. Sometimes you don't care. And at one point in the past, I actually toyed. I was under the bad influence of a friend of mine who became a friend. We were in the hospital together for weeks in Switzerland, and he was an ex-foreign legionnaire, and he had lots of star-spangled war stories. Well, it wouldn't be star-spangled in the case of the Legion, but these things appeal to a young man who is up for adventure and looking to get out of the rut that he might be in. But it's a bad idea. Uh, Joining the military, it's a flip of the coin. If you join the military, whether it's going to be, well, it actually is. It's 98% boredom, drudgery, and harassment, and 2% degradation and pure terror. So I'm generally opposed to the military, even though I get along fine with soldiers.
A great opportunity to discuss the preparation real quick in this episode. So, what you lay out in that book, along with Matt Smith and Maxim Smith, who's the guinea pig in all this, is a different path that men seeking adventure, seeking to make themselves and even fight, if that is which they should know how to do, right? Every man should know how to fight, but for themselves, right? And that is it, you lay out in the preparation, fantastic handbook. And by the time this releases, people will already have heard that episode with Matt Smith going into the details. But how does a book like The Preparation and what you've imagined, this kind of life plan for young men, routes that they can take, how is that a better alternative than what we just laid out with Julius Evola?
Yeah, well, when a young man gets out of high school, what is he supposed to do? Now you're 18 and you're kind of on your own. So it turns out that at least among middle class Americans, that over half of them think that they really ought to go to college because they've been told that it's a path to a higher income, it's a path to security, and it's something everybody's doing. And that's a mistake. I went to college, and even when I went to college, uh, I was unhappy about that choice I'd made. But what would I have done? What could I have done other than go to college? I could have gotten a dead end job, which is all that's really available to an 18-year-old kid, or do nothing. Well, that was unacceptable for lots of reasons, although lots of kids are spending time in their mother's basement playing video games and watching porn, or you join the military. It gives you direction, something to do. You get a little salary and so forth. But what we're trying to do, what we've tried to do in this book, The Preparation, is show a young man why he shouldn't misallocate 4 years of his time. That's not the right word. I used to think going to college was a misallocation. And then I thought it was a waste, which it is, but it's worse than a waste. It's actively destructive of your mental and financial faculties. It should be avoided. But what we try to do in the book is show young men what they should do or can do. Uh, I mean, everything. So that by the time you've spent 4 years following the path we lay out in the preparation, you're not just, some guy that's got a piece of paper that says you got a degree, which is basically worthless today, but you'll be practically a Renaissance man, knowing how to do everything and in a position to earn much more money and survive under any circumstances, which, especially in today's world, is important because the day of joining a corporation to become an organization man or a middle manager, I suppose, those days are over with the artificial intelligence revolution and the fact that the world itself, and the United States in particular, are very, very unstable and unpredictable these days. So that's my basic pitch, Gabriel.
It's a great pitch. People will have heard Matt Smith's pitch as well. So we'll have a link. Definitely go check out the preparation, leave a review. Self-published book, not the kind of book that, Barnes & Noble or one of these places is going to be selling. So grassroots effort for sure. Definitely go pick up a copy. If not for you, then some other young man in your life or older man who is looking to prepare himself for being a Renaissance man. I wanted to, Doug, talk about the concept of evil with you because I'm very interested in. You brought this up in your previous writings. Totally Incorrect, still one of my favorite books you wrote. Opened my eyes to a lot of things. We discussed psychopaths in a previous episode we did. Now, in the Bible, Doug, we have a famous verse, right? I'll just read from the KJV version. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. So this is from Ephesians, and other translations talk about the cosmic powers of this present darkness. So there's this view, you'll especially see this from religious people. There's actually a writer called Frank Peretti. He writes an entire novel called This Present Darkness, and what he imagines is this sleepy American town where all the evil, he has these two visions, right? You see what's happening in the real world, or the kind of the human world, and then every other chapter will switch to the angelic world, where there's these guardian angels and they're fighting against these demons who are responsible for tricking humans and tempting them, as if evil is not something within humans, but it is something they're always being enticed by these spiritual entities. And so if you take that very literally, you can find these Christians, of course, who don't really believe in evil as in something within you, but as something always being, you'll hear Christians say, oh, he's being tempted by the devil to do this. It's, we should forgive him. It's not his fault, essentially. What do you see, and what do you think, from your point of view, you're an atheist, I believe, what do you see as evil, and how do you grapple with the concept of evil?
Yeah, it actually can be a tough word to define. What is good and what is evil? And do people grasp with that and grapple with what those words really mean? I think at most they just take somebody else's word for it. Like you were quoting from St. Paul, not to go off on a tangent, but the New Testament. Frankly, I'm a fan of Jesus of Nazareth. I don't have much. I don't have any trouble at all with what Jesus says and does. Of course, what he says and does. If he died around the year 30 or 33 A.D., the first gospel was only written 30, 40 years after he was dead. So it was all, and not by any of the apostles either. So it was all kind of hearsay. But still, I'm a fan of Jesus. But St. Paul is a different cat, totally. And I think most people aren't aware of the fact that he never even met Jesus. So, what he believed, who knows what where he got what he believed. But Paulism is actually a very different religion from Jesusism, and they have different views of what's good and evil. And most of what we think in the West about what's good and evil comes from the Bible. A- And the same is true, frankly, of the Jews, except it's from the Old Testament, not the New Testament, and the Muslim comes from the Koran as opposed to the Bible. So these definitions of good and evil are all over the place. And of course, if you're a communist or a Nazi or God knows what, you get into different definitions yet of good and evil. So it's a big subject, Gabriel. I'm not sure that I can give you a good definition just off the top of my head. Not that I haven't thought about it, but nothing on the top of my head. What do you want to use as a definition of evil?
I'm not sure I have one either, Doug. Maybe a different question that doesn't require us to define terms is: do you find that this perception of evil that comes from conventional Christianity? I don't even know necessarily if that is what evil is in the Bible, but this conventional definition, it really doesn't prepare people for the evil in the world. And I would argue, even theologically, that psychopaths are people who don't have a soul, right? They're not human, even according to Christian standards. And Christians really have trouble grappling with that idea that there's just some pure evil malignity that wants to harm them and manipulate them and destroy them. Do you think that this view of evil inadequately prepares people for the world?
Yeah, well, I don't like to take anybody's word for anything, frankly. I like to investigate it and prove it to myself. And I think, and of course, this is a theological question, and people argue about this stuff. They have religious wars about these things. But I think for a Christian, evil is whatever the Bible says it is. And one of the problems with the Bible is that it can prove and disprove both sides of any argument. The righteous come in and slaughter their enemies and and their children and their cattle, and it's good because God says it's good, and so forth. So I'm not even sure. In fact, I'm pretty sure that the Bible isn't a very good arbiter of what's good and evil, but it's the arbiter that we use in the West. I think it's a better idea to try to think this thing out.
It really undercuts free will, right? When you say, oh, he's just basically under the influence, not that he willfully decided to harm you.
Yeah, that's a question of blaming it on somebody else. And blaming whatever goes wrong on somebody else is irresponsible. And one of the most important things that you can do in trying to define what's good is to take responsibility for your own actions. In fact, looking at this question of what's good and what's evil and trying to come up with a definition of it, Christians, I use the Ten Commandments as a basic arbiter. Most people can't even remember the Ten Commandments, and then you got to figure: is it the Jewish rendition or the Catholic or the Protestant rendition of the Ten Commandments anyway? But most people can't even remember them, and I'm not even sure that they're a good guide. They're certainly an incomplete guide. It's been said that the best way to formulate an easy to remember rule that you can live by is just to remember a little aphorism: do all that you say you're going to do, and don't impinge upon other people or their property. And if you observe those two simple sentences, you're basically going to avoid evil. But I started talking about that in the context of responsibility. If you just do what you're told in the Bible, you'll be okay. You don't have to be responsible if you just do as you're told. But I think a better definition of what you should do to avoid evil is do as thou wilt, but be prepared to accept the consequences. Oh, wait a minute, but then you have to think out what are the consequences of what I do? And by having to figure that out, you become responsible. And this is my personal opinion, is that creation is good and humanity is basically good. You'll probably do the right thing. So a lot of evil is as a result of irresponsibility, not necessarily bad intentions at all, but irresponsibility, which is different. But, this is why people have written many, many volumes about the subject. It's complex. Well, then, of course, you got the golden rule. Do unto others do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I'm not even sure about that. I think a better rendition of it would be don't do unto others what you wouldn't have them do unto you. It's it's a big subject.
Absolutely. Just maybe one additional thought here. The existentialist, you have Jean-Paul Sartre, Simone de Beauvoir. I remember there was a line in there. I forget if it was de Beauvoir in her Ethics of Ambiguity, or maybe it was Sartre, and they say the Christian doesn't hurt you because they're afraid of being punished later on. I don't hurt you because I appreciate you. Who's the more moral person? And it was this pretty interesting way of framing it, I think. Yeah.
Good point, Gabriel. That's quite correct. Not doing evil because you're afraid of being published or punished, or is there a better reason not to do evil, or perhaps to do actual good?
How about a kind of an adjacent topic to all this? So another quote for you. This comes from the Nobel Prize winner Anatole France, where he says that dueling was the first, quote, the first tool of civilization, the only means man found to reconcile his brutal instincts and his ideal of justice. Do you think the world would be a better place if dueling still existed, Doug?
Yes, I do, because it's a question of how are you going to resolve disputes between yourselves. Now, today, disputes are resolved by the state. Now, what does that mean? In today's world, it's some arbitrary law passed by some politicians. They're not wise solons. They're generally uh, corrupt individuals that are drawn to politics. What kind of people are drawn to politics? It's people that like to control and manipulate other people. So laws are a consequence of that kind of mentality. So if you're going to disinvolve the state from resolving disputes, well, I think the market can do it much better than the state. Well, we're talking about dueling as a way to resolve disputes. I don't believe the state is a good arbiter of the subjects of duels. Who should get this or who said that or whatever. I think the market is a better arbiter of these things. In other words, if you believe that you're offended or something was stolen from you or whatever the reason is for wanting recompense, in a free market society, we'd have arbitration agencies, not some political judge acting according to arbitrary political laws decides who's right and who is wrong, but a panel of people that are professional and are chosen by both sides based upon the intelligence and the fairness and the low cost of their decisions. That's a better way. I think that's the best way of resolving disputes. But I think there's something to be said for dueling. I mean, a lot of disadvantages to dueling. It doesn't determine who's right, it just determines who's still alive. But look, it's a problem of life, and at least if there's a duel, the most competent and or the most courageous person will survive, assuming the duel takes place, which certainly can help determine that. I don't know. What do you think?
I asked that question to see what you had to say. I don't know that I have my own thoughts. I certainly agree that the state has become the monopoly on violence, and that has a number of consequences. By offloading that to people, we've really lost touch with how brutal humanity can be, and I think we're very unprepared when we face it. There was that Ukrainian girl who was stabbed in a train the other day, and I'm just like, people are so shocked and out. People don't have the ability to digest this because they don't have that sort of thing in their life day to day. They're just coddled. They live in the what I call the cult of security, and they're not at all prepared for what happens when we don't live in a coddling world.
Yeah. Yeah, and that instance was really quite shocking because it was totally random and pointless, violence. In the last novel that I wrote with John Hunt, Assassin, the opening line in that book is, "Some people just need killing."
Right.
And I think that's true. Now, if anybody had shot that miscreant after he stabbed that girl, uh, he would be tied up in court and bankrupted, probably, for tied up in court for months and then bankrupted. And then maybe, because of the way the law is written, he might have to do hard time in a pen for doing the right thing and ridding society of the criminal that stabbed her. So the present system is no good. Yeah, I think that it's one of the reasons why the U.S. is fraying around the edges and why we're headed towards a civil war. It's that people see these instances of gross injustice, and they realize that they can't do anything about it. I mean, if you tried to stop, that guy that killed her, uh, the law would probably be against you, and you'd certainly be disarmed, unlike him, and might be prosecuted for having a weapon. The whole system is screwed up. It's been bureaucratized and politicized, and people that have any sense are fed up with it. And so the whole thing is going to be overturned at some point. I just don't know whether what comes out the other side is going to be better, hopefully. But these things usually get worse instead of better. So, yeah, I think that's an outstanding example of what we're looking at, and it's not good.
It makes me think, if people think the U.S. is bad, after a farmer defended himself from attackers in France, Macron came out and he said, this is almost verbatim, we do not believe in self-defense in this country.
Yeah. Oh, that's true throughout Europe. Europe, the birthplace. Well, yeah, it is the birthplace of Western civilization, and Europe is turned into a cesspool where the average European, if he hasn't been totally corrupted, if the average European has been totally corrupted by many decades of welfarism and crazy Marxist and collectivist ideas that have been taught, and not just even taught, they're just insinuated all throughout the society. So the fact that the president of a major country in Europe can say that and not be strung up by his heels like Mussolini was, uh, to me is just shocking. The fact that he could actually enunciate that, and then nobody does anything about the fact that he says that. I don't know how much protest there's been against that, and it's true throughout Europe. They all say that, and Europeans are legally disarmed. Well, maybe the Swiss aren't, but even Switzerland's gone downhill a lot. So it's how deep into the cesspool do we have to sink before we rise to the surface, or maybe you just get trapped at the bottom. And but yeah, that's shocking, isn't it?
It absolutely absurd. Just as you say, these Europeans and Americans are whipped dogs. And maybe similar to this topic, you're the original international man. You've been to all these countries, hundreds, close to 200 countries, I think, at this point. Are there any countries that you've been to, Doug, that when I asked this question come immediately to mind, that were so disagreeable that you told yourself, I'm never coming back here?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. What country would that be? Well, frankly, A Africa is a continent in trouble. It really is. It's I like Africa for adventure. I like it for opportunity. Uh, because if you're a North American and visit Africa, everybody wants to get to know you because they know that you're probably richer, and that's important. And you've got a lot of experiences and knowledge and connections that they don't have. So it's possible to go places and do things in Africa more than it is in North America, where you're just one of many, many millions of people just like yourself. So I'm not, Africa's a mixed bag. The problem is that Africa is going to turn into a giant war zone in the years to come. It's already turning into a war zone, um, chaos zone, really.
And if Giant Bandaria was here, he'd say, "Well, and you're right, Doug. It's actually even worse than than that."
Yeah, I love listening to Giant rap about the third world because as bad as Europe is, having discarded all of the uh, all of the good things that were built up over centuries in Western civilization and adopting third world values. I mean, the third world didn't even have these Western values to start with, so it's even more degraded. But I'm trying to answer your question. Is there any country that I can think of that I've been to that I would not want to go back just because it's so really degraded? Well, things can change quickly because look at Cambodia. How long ago was this? Like 40 years ago when Pol Pot was ruling the country. And there, nobody knows for sure, but they say about a quarter of the population was killed by the government for for basically not having calluses on their hands or wearing glasses or being educated. Uh, I mean, this is one of the worst crimes in all of human history. But now, if you go back to Cambodia, it seems like a normal place. So I would think that while Pol Pot was running the place, I would have said, yeah, that place is hell on earth. It's a hellhole. You don't want to go back there ever. But now you go to Cambodia and it seems like a perfectly nice third world country. So things can change. But on the other hand, place that seems perfectly nice now can turn into a Cambodia or, well, like Europe during World War I, or for that matter, World War II. Very civilized until all of a sudden it's mass murder. Now, I don't think I could put my finger on any place that I just definitely would never want to go just because things change so much. And frankly, I'm getting more and more uneasy about being here in the US. I really am. It's getting a little bit weird when a speedboat in international waters can be blasted with a Hellfire missile. And Vance says he doesn't give a shit because he thinks that they were drug dealers. Well, how is it how is dealing in drugs different than doing the same thing during Prohibition when people were dealing in alcohol, which was prohibited at that time? And it's none of your business anyway if people want to do drugs. But the thing is, to kill 11 people, I don't know if they're good people or bad people. I mean, we get what we're talking about with what's good and evil. Um, and this is amazing, and n- nobody nobody seems to be outraged, or not many people seem to be outraged about things like that going on. So this is scary when a country starts doing stuff like that. I mean, any speedboat in international waters might look suspicious, and might get blasted. But they don't tell you why. There's no trial. There's no investigation, like stopping the boat. And if you think that they're actual criminals, asking them questions and pursuing this thing, according to some kind of protocol, you just send a helicopter out and launch a hellfire at it. This is amazing to me. It can happen anywhere now. Anyway.
This has been Doug Casey. We've mentioned his latest book, The Preparation. We'll have links to that. I will link to his other stuff. He does a regular show with Matt Smith. I'll link it to. I'll have all the links. Don't worry, Doug. We'll have all the links to your novels and all the rest. Just give you any final thoughts you have for people.
This has been a trend that's been building up for decades, actually, at an accelerating rate. And it seems to me that we're really on the edge of a precipice. Economically, where I think things could collapse financially, leading to all kinds of bad circumstances. Militarily, with these wars, socially, because frankly, I think that the U.S. is building up to an actual civil war of some type, not like the unpleasantness of 1861 to 65, which incidentally wasn't a civil war. It was actually a secession movement, but that's a different question. Yeah, I think it's going to get wild and woolly here in the next few years, and you definitely want to think about that possibility and develop some type of a plan B for yourself, because things can change pretty radically and quickly in the world today, as the Russians found out in 1917, and the Germans found out in 1932, and the Cubans found out in 1959, and I can give you dozens of other examples like that. And it may be the time for the U.S. on that dance card, which is scary.
Hey, thanks for listening. I could really use your help real quick. If you could share this episode with someone, engage with me, leave a review anywhere. This helps me to break the technocratic shadow banning that is happening with my brand. And of course, if you really want to escape the technocracy, go to escapethetechnocracy.com. Privacy tutorial series, books, newsletters, consulting, and of course, you can leave a donation. Thank you very much.